Our next guest has a very storied career in a variety of places. He is the new technical director for the Houston Dynamo. He is Asher Mendelsohn. He joins us now. Asher, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Glenn. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so your first initiative sort of reaction to getting offered the job and now being here in Houston.
I mean, I think it's incredibly exciting. I think when you ask around the league about markets that have the most potential and have the most room to grow in terms of what they can do, not just with the first team and with the fan base, but also with on the youth side. I mean, Houston's at the top of everyone's list, and people throw out words like the sleeping giants or sleeping dragons, but I think everyone's speaking to the potential of the market. And when you combine that with the ambition that the ownership has shown since they've come into the club, and then people of the quality of character like Pat Onstad, who's one of the best people I've met in soccer from a character standpoint, from a person standpoint, it's a great opportunity for me personally. I think there's a lot of potential here, and I think it's really exciting to be part of it.
Asher, when Pat asked you for that job, and I concur with you on Pat, what a great human being. When he asked you for the job, kind of how did that go down, if you can share that with us?
Sure. Pat and I have known each other for a long time. Maybe not as long as some people here in Houston have known Pat, but we spent a lot of time together during our days in Columbus, and he kind of looped me in early in the process of him interviewing for this role. Asking for some feedback, some advice in terms of how to present his ideas, which is something he and I used to do when he was in Columbus looking for other roles. And so it was a very familiar process for the two of us, and we have that type of relationship where I was giving him some advice even prior to him talking to me about this opportunity. And at the end of when he was going in for his last interview, he pulled me aside and said, "Well, is this something you'd be interested in being a part of if it works out for me?" And I said, "Of course." I said, "This is for all the reasons I stated. This is tremendous. This would be a tremendous opportunity. And good luck."
Yeah, that's a good one, Asher. Thank you so much.
Yeah. He's like I said, he's someone who you want to be successful, whether you're with him or you're not with him. He's someone you root for. He's just that type of guy.
All right. So with all the great guys coming in now, which I think that is something that's exciting us, the fact that now under new ownership, Ted Siegel, this technical director position has become created. What is the pecking order? You report to Pat, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's exactly correct. So I reported into Pat. He and I had some very good conversations when he talked about me coming in, about kind of where his role starts and where my role starts and how we overlap. And there is going to be some overlap in the beginning. I mean, the reality is we're coming into a situation where the club is my term, starving for an identity. And what that, people define that differently, but for me, when you look at a club identity, and there's some good examples in the league, whether it's Red Bull or whether it's a Sporting Kansas City or what we built in Columbus, these are clubs that it's not just how the club plays, but it's the type of people that you're bringing in. It's how those people act when they're not on the field. It's how it's how you set up. It's what color you pick to paint the walls and what pictures you put up, that you look at every day. I mean, it's everything. It's everything that you do. And so it's a big job. Creating a club identity is a big job. And it's not about one person who's gonna create that for us. I mean, it's not just about Pat. It's not just about Paulo who's come in. It's not about me. It's not about the players that we sign. It's everyone who's coming into the organization, from an assistant equipment manager for our academy all the way up, has to fit what this identity of the club is going to become. And it has to be something that a lot of people weigh in on, in terms of all the way from starting with ownership, getting input from fans, getting input from players, getting input from people who've been part of the club in the past. It has to resonate with people. I mean, if it was Pat and I sitting in a room with a whiteboard saying, "Okay, this is what the club should look like," it may fall flat. Even if we everything we live up to whatever we put on the whiteboard, if it doesn't resonate with people, then it's not real. It's not going to stick, and it can't be dependent on me or Pat or any individual. It's got to be a collective effort to build this. And
so you're talking both competitive side and the front office side as well.
Our
Is that
mandate is on the competitive side. So
right? But it's got to bleed over, right? It has
Yeah.
to bleed over. I mean, the culture you had in Columbus, the Sporting Kansas City culture, it has a lot of passionate soccer people in the front office as well.
That's right.
Do you foresee change?
No, I don't foresee any change. I mean, I'm speaking purely on the sporting sense. And that's, to be fair, that's been my exposure to date. So I'm not trying to set a precursor for anything outside of the sporting side.
All right, so let's go into technical director because you and I were talking before that it can be nebulous. It depends. It might be different in Atlanta. It might be different in LA. We finally have a technical director and you here, which is exciting. Take us into what your role is. I saw the press release. Obviously, you're very knowledgeable in the salary cap area, budget, roster, all these kinds of things, staff hiring. Take us into your job from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, and you're spot on. I mean, every club uses the technical director role a little bit differently. And I think my first mandate is really focusing on the club identity piece and applying that to the first team. And so it starts with how do we want to play as a team, and helping define that with Pat and putting that in, not just taking that out of one person's head and putting it on paper and starting to codify that. And then it's saying, okay, if we want to play this way, then what kind of coach do we want? And can we go out and find a coach who can execute this vision? And that was a big part of our search process, which was making sure that this coach is fitting the vision of the club that we're trying to build. And then the next piece after that is saying, okay, now we have a way we want to play. We have a coach who knows how to train this and teach this and manage this. Do we have the players to execute it? And so that's the next step of the process, which is helping Pat go out and secure the players that we need for the first team to be able to execute this. And then the phase after that is saying, okay, now are we utilizing our full pathway with our second team, the MLS Next Pro Club team, the academies? Are those now long-term also filling in what this identity looks like? And so it's a big process. And as a technical director compared to the GM, again, there's a lot of overlap in this, but it's a big job, and we're breaking it up. And I have some strengths specifically on how do we set the strategy of this up? How do we put this on paper? How do we organize it? How do we prioritize what we're going after? I mean, that's really what my background has been. When you cross over between MLS, the project I've done for MLS or the project I've done for US Soccer, or even in Columbus, this was a large part of helping organize this change process. And helping take a vision that someone has and make it a reality. That's a lot of what I do. I bring certain skill sets in terms of applying analytics. So I'm not a data guy myself, but I live in between the worlds of the soccer people and the data people, and try to make sense between the two of them and have them be able to talk to each other, because they speak different languages. I'm fluent in both. But I'm not necessarily. No one's going to hire me to write a book in either of them. So
Asher, you're scaring me. Sometimes I think I'm living in the Matrix. I don't know. Yeah, but I hear where you're coming from. And by the way, for my listeners, Asher Mendelsohn, 15 years, is 5 years at the Columbus Crew, U.S. national program, has been a part of creating MLS Next in that under 23 program. We'll get to that in a bit of a second. But what Dynamo fans say to me is, if everything's so good, how can there not be change in personnel? Because it hasn't been good the last 9 years. I mean, we have to be honest, and I think that's the refreshing thing that Pat Onstad, yourself, Paulo Nagamura are coming. We're finally speaking in reality, which we haven't been for a long, long time. And I don't even think the rest of the country understands how deep down we are here in Houston, and how much potential there is going forward in a multicultural city full of soccer people. Does that mean some personnel will change? And look, I don't like seeing people lose their jobs, but we got to be in reality here, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we're talking about personnel, there's two kind of ways to look at it. One is what does the roster look like on the field, and then the other is what's the backroom staff look like. I mean, and I think we have a lot of talent here in the backroom staff, and I'm still getting to know a lot of the people. Pat's been here a little longer than I have, but he's still getting to know people and having conversations in the off season is very different than seeing people work in the season. So I think we have a lot of talent here in the back room that I think we need to properly utilize and really align with, again, this identity that we're talking about. And so if we want to play a proactive style of play, do we have the field to do that? Do we have the high performance team to get the players ready to perform at that level? Everything has to align around it. If we're a player first organization, and which we want to be, do we have the right player care resources in place, and are people focused on that? And one thing that's really struck us when we're talking about support staff is the how much the people here care about this team, and how much they put into supporting the players and wanting us to win. And what we need to do is just align that underneath this new identity and put people to work and to make this identity a reality. So I think we have a lot of talent there, but I think your question is probably more oriented around the roster, because I know that's
Well, I mean, it's the roster, it's the academy, it's the under 23 team. And it's kind of an unfair question because, I mean, geez, you just got here. I mean, like you said, you have to see people work in order to find out who are the ones who are going to help you execute your mission and your plan here. Because look, people are educated down here. They know how difficult to turn this around it's going to be, and it is going to take time. Is there a time frame that ownership has given you guys? Look, guys, you don't have to get it right in the first 4 months, right? But you do have a timetable of 2 to 3 years, whatever it is, because Sporting Kansas City, for instance, it took a long time to turn that around under Peter Vermees.
Yeah, no, I think the ownership's been great. First of all, I mean, you couldn't ask for a better combination of people who are engaged and supportive and want to give resources without trying to make decisions in areas that they don't have expertise. And that takes a lot of self-discipline to not overstep that bound. I mean, I've really been impressed with what I've my interactions so far with ownership and how they've supported this early stage, and also how they've set out a vision of where they want to go and how soon they want to, and the realism of how soon they want to get there. For us, I can tell you this, that we want to be in the playoffs next year. I mean, I think we're going to be disappointed if we're not in the playoffs. And I know some people say, well, how does that pressure feel? And I just say, look, we're in pro sports. If you're not aiming to get in the playoffs, why? You're in the wrong business. And so, I mean, that is an expectation that we've certainly set, and we're not shy about saying that. So, in terms of, I don't think we're very many pieces away from being able to do that. I see a lot of resources here that just need to be reallocated and aligned. And I think with Paulo, we have a clear way. We have someone who can implement the way that we want to play. I think the way we want to play suits Houston very well from a climate standpoint, and from what we've heard from fans and former players, and that they want to see. And so, and Pat's described that. I mean, we want to be proactive. Essentially, when you're playing in this type of climate, in this type of heat, no one's going to be able to run with us. They're just not. I mean, you're not physically adapted to be able to play here in the summer months unless you're living in it. And the only teams that are living in it are Orlando and Miami. So if teams aren't going to want to play a vertical game against us. So they're either going to want to play in our third or in their third. And, and clubs can make a conscious choice. We could sit here and say, look, let's bunker in and let's transition and let's build a team to do that. But that's not what we want to do. We want to be proactive. And that's a word you hear a lot from Pat. We want to be playing in their third. We want them to feel the pressure of when they come into Houston, that this is a difficult place to play. And we're building a team that can try to accomplish that. And, that's a big part of why we're excited about Paulo, is that's the way his teams like to play. And so we think we found someone who can execute what we're hoping takes advantage of one of our biggest assets, which is the city of Houston, the climate in Houston. The weather here. We think that's a huge advantage for us, and we should fully embrace that.
He is a new technical director for the Houston Dynamo, Asher Mendelsohn, and this is a newly created position that the Houston Dynamo have never had. So this is a real evolutionary period as well. Is it a bit of a blank canvas in a way for you? I mean, obviously you inherit a roster, you inherit an academy, you inherit now, which is very good timing for you because I'm not sure you would have liked having your reserve team down in the Rio Grande Valley 6 hours away. So you got an under 23 program that's going to be here, but is in a way for you when you look at it, is there a little bit of a blank canvas here?
I wouldn't characterize it as a blank canvas. I mean, I think if you look at an expansion team, that's just true blank canvas. When you're coming in with nothing, and I think there's a lot of resources here. And I think when you look at the work that Paul Holliker and his team have done in the academy, I think they've made good strides over the last few years to start putting some more organization around the youth effort. I think we do have a little bit of a blank canvas with the second team, but even there, we have the advantage of having a group that's been training for the last year and having a coach already in place. And when you look at the first team, like I said, I don't think we're very many pieces away from being competitive. And so I think it's more about a reallocation of resources and having a very clear vision of what we want to accomplish, and then laying out a very clear plan of how we want to accomplish it, and then allocating the resources we have against that plan and making a few additions to that. And so I look at more of the project is more about realignment than it is about creating from scratch.
Accelerating player development to the point that we finally begin to produce players that are capable of being integral parts, deep parts, building blocks of a first team. When do you see that happening? And it's a question I've asked over and over again. It's sensitive in a way, I think, to people, but it's the reality. It's what the fan base wants to see, right? They're tired of hearing about FC Dallas. They're tired of hearing about other teams around the league selling players. How do you see that right now? And again, I know it's early for you, Asher. So
yeah, it's one of the mysteries that I've had. When I worked in my old role looking at player development across the whole country, and I was very focused on markets and talking about which markets are over-indexing in terms of producing elite players, which ones are under-indexing. And you look at a market like St. Louis, which historically over-indexes. When you look at the number of people who live there and the number of players they produce, the quality of those players, I mean, it's off the charts. And you look at a city like Houston, and they're historically underproducing. And so,
see, I'm gonna contend you on that.
Okay.
They haven't historically underproduced. Maybe the Dynamo current, yes, but prior to the Dynamo coming here, Chris Bondi, Johnny Torres, Imad Baba, Nelson Aquari. I mean, I can go on and on. I can go 25, 30 deep. Josh Gardner. These guys work in the community, a lot of them. So I'm not trying to be rude here at all, but as somebody who's been here since '84, I just can't sit here and not point out that we have tremendous soccer history. We have tremendous soccer knowledge, and we have a tremendous amount of guys that have gone into Major League Soccer prior to the Dynamo ever being relocated here, which really was a gift from San Jose. If we're being honest, we got gifted the San Jose Earthquakes, right? So I just wanted to make that point. You carry on.
And Glenn, that's fair. And I don't mean to speak poorly about the past here, because there's been some great players who have come out of Houston, and there are some great teams that have come out of Houston. So I'm not trying to say there's been nothing.
Yeah, it's not an underperforming market historically. Now, you may be saying it is when it comes to the Dynamo producing players, but quite frankly, we've produced coaches, we've produced players, and we need to embrace that. We need to remind ourselves that there's a lot that's gone on before 2006, and we got the gift of the San Jose Earthquakes, and that's part of helping change the culture too. But I want to get back to you now, because
no, it's okay. So I mean, I think the lens that I view through is this one: is that we have 9 million people here now in Houston?
Yeah, proper, yeah.
Okay, so that's the size of many European countries. And so when I'm saying that we're underproducing, I'm comparing it to a European country that's playing in the Euros and competing to win the Euros. And that's how I look at it, is saying, we have a country's worth of people here. And when you look at the climate, and when you look at the demographics, and when you look at the international nature of this city, I would expect it to be not, and this is not a slight on anyone who's come before. So let me make that 100% clear. And thank you for that correction, because I don't mean to say nothing's coming.
No, I know you didn't. I know you.
But I'm holding it to a very, very high standard when I say that. and say, that's the potential that I see. And so, that's what I think is exciting. And what I don't know, and this is what I'm very curious about. This is the mystery part that I talked about, is how do we help it? How do we achieve that? Right. How do we get to that point? And I don't know the answer to that yet, but that's something I want to dig into and talk to people and talk to a lot of the people who have made it, who have had success here, and figure out how do we replicate that at a bigger scale.
Well, there's a lot of people that'll help you. Trust me. You're talking to one of them right now. So if you want to chat about past history here and youth development, we're all willing to help and help you and all your knowledge that you're bringing here. And again, we're happy you're here. Asher Mendelsohn, the technical director of the Houston Dynamo. All right, when you look at the roster and some of the pieces, that I know there's going to be an assessment period for all of you guys, and it is a collaborative thing. You, Pat, Paulo, Nick Koba. Do you look at guys and you say, okay, we want this pressing system, proactive? Are you looking at some of those guys and saying, we can get more out of them? We have to get more out of them because you're inheriting a roster that was not successful.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's not very different than the situation that we were in Columbus when we moved there, which is, we had a number of good players there, that some of them weren't given. Some of them, had more to give. They had more potential in them. And in our first year there, we didn't make very many changes. We brought in a new starting center back. We ended up bringing two center backs and a goalie. And I think from that, we took a team that hadn't been in the playoffs in 2 years and brought them back to the playoffs. And then we built on that over time. And I think that's a really good model to look at in terms of recognizing that a lot of times it doesn't take very many pieces to turn a team around, especially if we have very clear direction of how we want to play, and then a very good way to train that way to play. And in Columbus, we inherited a team that wasn't originally built to be a possession-based team. They played a very different way. But when we put the style of play in that we had, and we taught it very clearly, all of a sudden players who you wouldn't think could play in a possession-based system, all of a sudden they were flourishing. And so I'm a big believer in, if you have a very good system and you have a good coaching staff to teach that system, you can get a lot more out of players than asking players to solve a lot of the problems on their own.
Yeah, I think we're excited because this position is created. You're coming in with the experience. Obviously, Pat Onstad, and he's, to me, no nonsense guy. I love that about him. Transparent. I think it's going to be a tremendous time for fans in understanding what you guys are trying to do. You're all good communicators, and I think the media is going to have a field day if they want it to really talk to you guys and ask you real questions, because you guys seem unafraid. I want to go one more here before we let you go. And I'm super excited the under 23 program is going to be here. I just think as a vehicle of obviously accelerating player development, but also for the fans to be able to look at the up and coming players and seeing how that's going to operate. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, about Kenny Bundy being in charge, and then about, how much oversee of that you have?
Yeah, that's an area that that Nick Koba is going to have a lot of oversight over. He's been intimately involved in the creation of that team, and it's something that he's gonna really sink his teeth into. For Pat and I think it's a lot about going back to the alignment, and we have an identity that we want that team to replicate, and we want to make sure that that team's fulfilling its primary objective, which is developing players for the first team. That is why we have that team. That's why we have an academy, is that we want to develop players for the first team. Now, the benefit of having that ambition with an academy is if a player doesn't make it as a pro, it still prepares them to be a good soccer player to go play in college. And that's great. They should go and do that. So, but our youth teams and our second team are by design here to try to create players who can help us win games with the first team. And yep. And so that's kind of is making sure that we don't lose sight of that, because as a coach, you want to coach to win. And as a player, you want to play to win. And sometimes when you're asking someone to be focused on development, sometimes that means that They have to make decisions that may not help them win on the weekend, but may help the club win on the long run. And it doesn't mean we don't want that whoever's on the field to try to win that game, because that's part of development. Winning is part of development. We have to teach that and we have to prioritize that. But it's about also stretching people and stretching young people into situations that maybe make them a little bit uncomfortable, and maybe they fail. But that's part of the learning process that they need to do in order to be ready to go to the next level.
Asher Mendelsohn joining us here, technical director, Houston Dynamo, coming to Houston. Some of these questions really probably, to be fair to you, should have been asked in about a month or two, but we're getting right into it. Listen, people down here want to get right to the core of it now. It's been a long, tedious time for them. And I think it's fair for fans here to be a little bit skeptical. That's fair based on what's happened in the past. It has nothing to do with what you guys have done, but that's the context of where they're coming from as well. So the last thing I'm going to say is Columbus had a different approach to the youth soccer community. Seattle does. Will the Dynamo, because look, I know a lot of things going on in the youth community, and I know that the relationship can be much, much better. Will you look to partner more, to extend the olive branch more, to collaborate more with the youth soccer community, to bring them under the umbrella of the Houston Dynamo and not compete with them as much?
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't know the market well enough in terms of the different people involved, so I don't know all the dynamics at play. I'd love to learn. I want to learn more about it, to know how we can try to use your term, extend olive branches, and be more collaborative and be a resource for the soccer community and not be a competitor. I think that's in general, those are things that we've talked about as values, and I see the opportunity, and I'll speak general here. This is not about Houston in particular, because but in my experience in different markets around the country, in general, I think there's a huge opportunity for the MLS clubs to be a resource for the soccer communities, and whether that's through coaching education, whether that's through player opportunities, whether that's through the things that specific needs for markets. I think every market's a little bit different, and to be fair, that's an area where there's different sensitivities, and I'm just not fluent enough in what's happened here in Houston to be able to know what the solutions are yet.
Okay, and that's fair. And listen, like I said, some of these questions should be 3 or 4 months down the road. I just wanted to get a good broad base of you out to the public here. I really, really appreciate this. Please forgive me if I overstepped my bounds a little bit, but having been here since '84, it's hard for me to not remind people of a lot of other great things that have occurred here and a lot of resources that are here that are untapped when it comes to realizing potential, in my very, very humble opinion. Asher, thank you so much for coming on. Let's do this again. I appreciate all your time, and welcome to Houston.
Great. It's great to be here. Thanks, Glenn. Thanks for the time.
All right.